Okay, so for day 4, we're going to do things slightly different. So welcome back. We're going to look at the practice question from the ACCUPLACER exam, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go through it. It's going to be a little bit difficult for you, which is understandable, especially if it's been a long time since you've been in school. Then we're going to go over 5 skills that you need in order to feel confident answering these types of questions. Multiplying numbers by variables, multiplying variables by variables, distributive method, combining like terms, and multiplying binomials. Then we're going to do another problem that is similar to the first one after we go through those 5 skills. And you're going to see that you're going to feel so much more confident doing these types of problems just by sticking through this video and learning these 5 skills. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started with question number 4. Again, be patient with yourself if this first question is difficult, because I'm going to go through several examples of how to do each of these skills. So let's get started. It says, which of the following expressions is equivalent to x plus 7 times x squared minus 3x plus 2? Okay, so we're going to go ahead and write that out. X plus 7, x squared minus 3x plus 2. So because this is a parentheses and it's in front of this parentheses, we're going to distribute. And what that means is everything that's in this first parentheses, we're going to multiply against everything that's in that second parentheses. How is that going to look? It's going to do x times x squared, x times negative 3x, and x times plus 2. Once we have those multiplied out, we're going to move to the 7. 7 times x squared, 7 times negative 3x, and then 7 times 2. Okay, so are you ready to get started? So we're going to go ahead and we're going to do x times x squared. X times x squared. This is x to the first power times x squared. When you're multiplying, you add the exponents. So it will be x to the third power. Again, this one I'm going to move through a little bit quickly, but then I'm going to explain each one of these skills. So x to the third power. Then I'm going to do x times negative 3x. X times negative 3x. So I'm going to go ahead and put that invisible 1. 1 times negative 3 is negative 3. X times x is x to the first power times x to the first power. You add the powers, so it's x squared. So negative 3x squared. I'm going to erase this. Then we're going to go ahead and do x times 2. So x times 2, there's an invisible 1 in front of it. 1 times 2 is 2. X times this invisible 1 is x. So the answer is going to be 2x. And now we're done with the x. So we're going to move on to the 7. Remember, we're multiplying everything in this first parentheses by everything in the second parentheses. We multiplied everything by the x. So now let's go ahead and multiply everything by the 7. So 7 times x squared, 7 times x squared is 7x squared. 7 times negative 3x is negative 21x. And 7 times 2 is 14, so plus 14. I'm going to erase this. Again, all the skills that I just did in this first example, I'm going to break down with plenty of examples in the skill set. This is just so that we can get through our answers for this first one. So we're going to go ahead, and now that we've multiplied everything out, we're going to go ahead and combine like terms. So x to the third power, there's no terms that are similar to it. There's no other values that's x to the third power. So we're just going to leave it the same, x to the third power. Now we're going to go ahead and see x squared. So we have negative 3x squared and 7x squared. They're like terms because they both have x to the second power. So we're going to add them. Negative 3 plus 7 is 4x squared. Okay? And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to look at 2x. 2x and negative 21x are like terms because they both have x to the first power, x to the first power. So negative 21 plus 2 is negative 19x. And then we just are left with 14, and there's nothing to combine that with, so that's what we're left with. So our answer is x to the third power plus 4x squared minus 19x plus 14. So our answer is going to be B. Okay, so during this, we use those 5 skills. We multiplied numbers by variables. We multiplied variables by variables. We used the distributive method. We combined like terms. We multiplied binomials. And that's how we were able to solve a question like this. So if you feel like you were struggling to keep up with me, that's okay, because I'm going to show you each one of the skills, and then we're going to do another problem that's similar. Okay, multiplying numbers by variables. So do you remember when I was multiplying 7 times x squared? How did I do that? Well, there always is an invisible 1 in front of every variable. So in front of every letter, there's always an invisible 1. If there's no number there, there's an invisible 1. So if you have x to the third power, there's an invisible 1. X to the fourth power, there's an invisible 1. Okay, so when you're multiplying, the first thing I would recommend is, if there's no number before the variable, which in this case there wasn't, to put in that invisible 1. Okay, now that we have the 1 there, all you have to do is multiply the numbers against each other. So you would do 7 times 1, which is 7. Okay, then you multiply the variables against each other. Since there is no variable to multiply against each other, the answer is, since there are no numbers, glitch, I apologize. My iPad is getting a little bit old. I'm going to have to get a new one eventually, but I have to save up. Sorry, guys. Okay, so there's going to be nothing to multiply it against the second variable. So we're just going to leave it as is, x squared. So 7 times 1x squared is 7x squared. Let's try this again. What if I had 2 times x to the third power? Again, since there's no number in front of the x, I'm going to put my invisible 1. Then I'm going to multiply the numbers. 2 times 1 is equal to 2. Because there's nothing to multiply that x by, then I'm just going to leave it as x to the third power. So can you guys tell me what 8 times x to the fourth would be? Take a second and go ahead and try. Okay. If the first thing you did was to put in the invisible 1, great job. In second, you multiply the numbers. 8 times 1, which is 8. Since there's nothing to multiply this x to the fourth by, you just bring it down into your answer. So the answer would be x to the fourth. Well done, you guys. Okay, so that's how you multiply numbers by variables. But in this problem, I also multiplied variables by variables. So let's slow it down. Let's not get overwhelmed, and let's figure out how to do this. So when you're multiplying variables times variables, and variables just mean letters by letters, you add the exponents if they're the same letter. So because this is the same letter, if I was multiplying, I would just add the exponents. Well, what are the exponents? When there's no exponent there and there's a letter, there's always invisible 1s. So I would just add the exponents. 1 plus 1. So x times x is x squared. Okay, what about x squared times x to the third power? Again, since they're the same variable, same letter, you just add the exponents. The answer would be x to the fifth. Okay, so let's just add a number in there just to take it to the next level. So say I had 2x times x squared. What do I do here? I'm just going to combine skill number 1 with skill number 2. I'm going to go ahead and put my invisible 1 there. And then I'm going to go ahead and multiply the numbers. 2 times 1, which is 2. And then I'm going to multiply the variables. X times x squared. X times x squared. There's an invisible 1 on the top by the 1. So you just add the exponents. X, 1 plus 2. So x to the third power. So my answer would be 2x to the third power. Well done, you guys. All right, so we've practiced multiplying variables, numbers by variables. We practiced multiplying variables by variables, and we also practiced multiplying numbers with variables times numbers with variables. So let's go ahead and practice the distributive method. And it's very important that we practice the distributive method, and we're going to keep it as simple as possible. So distributive method just means if you have numbers or variables or a combination of them inside of parentheses, and you have a number on the outside, this means that you have to distribute the number on the outside to everything that's on the inside. Distribute just means multiply. So I would multiply the 2 times the 2x and the 2 times the 3. So let's go ahead and do that. 2 times 2x. Do you remember how we do that? 2 times 2 is 4. There's nothing to multiply the x by, so the answer would be 4x. Perfect. So 4x is my first value, and then 2 times 3. 2 times 3 is just 6. So my answer would be 4x plus 6. Let's try this again. So say I had 4x times 2x plus 3. So because the 4x is on the outside and this value is on the inside, we're going to go ahead and distribute because there's a parentheses showing that we need to distribute. So 4x times 2x. Do you remember how to do that? 4x times 2x. 4 times 2 is 8. X times x. You add the exponents, so it'll be x squared. 8x squared. And then we would do 4x times 3. So let's go ahead and do 4x times 3. Do you remember how to do that? Well, multiply the numbers. 4 times 3 is 12. And there's nothing to multiply the x by, so you just carried it over to the answer. So the answer would be plus 12x. So that would be our answer. So distributive method just means when you see a parentheses in front of a parentheses, or if you see a number inside a parentheses, you're going to go ahead and distribute. Okay, so in 2 skills from now, we're going to practice when there's 2 parentheses, but for right now, basic skill, distributive method. Are you sticking with me? How are you feeling? I hope you're feeling okay. I hope you're not feeling overwhelmed. Please just note, I'm just going to take this moment to just remind you guys. Most students have to learn all of these skills within a year. If you haven't been in school in forever, and a lot of people are going back to school and they haven't taken math in forever, and you're trying to learn this before a test in a week or in a few days, please be patient with yourself, please, because again, this takes a year to learn. So it's going to take a little while to remember, but if you're even remembering just a little bit of what I'm teaching you, then you're doing a great job. All right, combining like terms. So sometimes after you use the distributive method, you have a lot of terms. For example, do you remember when we had something that looked like 4x squared, 2x squared, x, 3x plus 15? Do you remember when we had something like that after we did all the multiplying out? Well, you don't give your answer to the test. You don't give your answer to the teacher like this. You actually have to combine like terms. So let's talk about how we do that. Like terms means that they're similar in the values that they have with the exponents and the variables. So this number or this term has x squared. So in order to find a like term, you have to look for another term that also has x squared. So 4x squared and 2x squared are like terms. They have the same variable with the same exponent. Because they have the same variable with the same exponent, we can combine them. Combining just means adding. So 4x squared plus 2x squared is 6x squared. You don't add the exponents. I know that's a question that I make it in the comments. You don't add the exponents. This is basically saying if I had 4 apples plus 2 apples, how many apples would I have? I would have 6 apples. So when you're combining like terms, you're not adding any of the exponents, you're not adding any of the variables, you're literally just adding the numbers in front of them. Okay? So we have 6x squared. Let's continue to combine like terms. We got to remember the skill that we're working on, combining like terms. So we have an x here. Do you see any other term that would be similar to this x? If you say 3x, then you're correct. Why? Because this is x to the first power, x to the first power. Because they have the same variable with the same invisible power, you can combine them. So you do x plus 3x. But do you remember what's always in front of an invisible, or what number is always invisible in front of the x? Well, there's always a 1. So again, 1 apple plus 3 apples would be equal to 4 apples. Again, you only add the numbers in front of them, and then you're going to go ahead and add that together, and it will be 4x. Okay, so we have our answer so far is 6x squared plus 4x. Now 15, there are no other numbers that are by themselves, so you just bring it down and add 15. Now, if there was 15 minus 3, then any numbers are like terms. So if you had 4 and 3, because they're just numbers, they're like terms. If you had a positive and a negative number, -3 plus 5, -3 plus 5, even though one's a positive number and one's a negative number, they're still like terms because they're both numbers by themselves. So anytime you have numbers that are just by themselves, they are like terms. You can add them together and simplify. So combining like terms, we would put the terms that are together and we would get our answer. Okay, are you guys sticking with me? I know it may be a long video. I don't know how many minutes I've been teaching, but this is literally I'm just trying to help you. If you stick with this video, then you'll be much better on at least 30% of the questions on your upcoming test. So just stick with it and continue on. Now we're going to talk about multiplying binomials by binomials. So we talked about the distributive method, but we only used one number here. But sometimes there's more than one number. For example, you may have x plus 2 times 4 plus 5x. So what to do in this case? You're still distributing, but you're distributing one value at a time. So I like to make my arrows. You should also make your arrows. You're taking this x and you're multiplying it by everything in that second parentheses. Once you're done doing all that multiplying, then you're taking that 2 and multiplying it by everything in the second parentheses. But now you have the skills in order to do that. So you should start building up your skills. You should start feeling more confident by this point in the video. So let's go ahead and see how we could do with this. So I'm going to erase the arrows just for me to start from scratch. And let's get started. So we're going to do x times 4. X times 4 on the side. There's an invisible 1. 1 times 4 is 4. There's nothing to multiply the x by, so it's 4x. And then we're going to do x times 5x. X times 5x. There's an invisible 1. 1 times 5 is 5. Multiplying x times x. Do you remember what happens with the exponents? Yep, you add them. So 1 plus 1 is 2. So it would be 5x squared. So plus 5x squared. And we're done with the x. Now we're going to move on to the 2, and we're going to multiply everything by the 2. 2 times 4 is 8, and then 2 times 5x. 2 times 5x. 2 times 5 is 10. There's nothing to multiply the x by, so we're just going to have it in the answer, plus 10x. Okay, now that we've multiplied binomials by binomials, we have to add like terms or combine like terms. But we just went over that skill in the last one. Do you see how I planned this out? Okay, so let's go ahead and combine like terms. So is there anything to combine the 4x to? Yes. There's also a 10x. They're like terms because they both have an invisible 1 by the x. 4x plus 10x, 4 apples plus 10 apples equals 14 apples, or 14x. There's nothing to combine the 5x squared to, so we're going to leave that 5x squared. And there's nothing to combine the 8 with because there's no other numbers by themselves. I'm not going to leave the answer like this, though, because there comes an order of things. When you're doing math, you still have to be very orderly. So when I give my answer, the only difference, I got all the right numbers, it's just what order I have to put them in. I start with the greatest exponent, and then I end with the numbers. So the greatest exponent is x squared. So I'm going to do 5x squared. Then this is x to the first power, so then I'm going to put plus 14x. And since there's no more x's, then I'm just going to put the number, plus 8. You order it. 2, 1, and then nothing. All right, you guys ready? All right, so this is what I want to do now. I want to go ahead and I'm going to simplify the expression based on everything that we just learned. And you guys just learned a lot. So let's go ahead and do this problem. You're not going to feel the same way as when we did problem number 1. You guys are going to feel a lot more confident. You may need more practice after this, yes, but you're going to feel a lot more confident. So are you guys ready to do this with me? All right, so we're going to do x plus 3 times x minus 3x plus 5. So again, because this information is here next to a parentheses with terms in them, we are going to distribute. So we're going to take the x and multiply the x by everything in the second parentheses. So that's where we're going to start. X times x. X times x. They both have x to the first power. You add the exponents, so it's x squared. Then you're going to do x times negative 3x. X times negative 3x. There's an invisible 1 there. 1 times negative 3 is negative 3. X times x, because there's invisible 1s, you add them. X to the first power plus x to the first power, and you'd have, multiplied, sorry. When you add them together, you'll get x squared. So negative 3x squared. And then we're going to do x times 5. X times 5. We're going to put an invisible 1 there. 1 times 5 is 5. There's nothing to multiply the x by, so the answer is 5x. And we are done using the x. So now we're going to multiply the 3 by everything in the second parentheses, because that's the distributive method. So 3 times x. 3 times x. There's an invisible 1 there. 3 times 1 is 3. There's nothing to multiply the x by, so 3x. Then we're going to do 3 times negative 3x. Okay? 3 times negative 3 is negative 9. There's nothing to multiply the x by, so we just bring it down. Negative 9x. Okay? And then we're going to go ahead and do the last bit, which is 3 times 5. So 3 times 5 is 15. Now, my little mistake is I was originally going to put a little x squared here. X squared minus 3x plus 5. I didn't do that, so my apologies. I may give us another example at the very end. But we'll go ahead and we'll still combine like terms, and we'll see what answer that we get, because you still can get an answer by doing this. So combining like terms, now that we've multiplied everything out, x squared and negative 3x squared. There's an invisible 1. 1 minus 3 is negative 2x squared. Remember, 1 apple minus 3 apples is negative 2 apples. Okay? And then 5x minus 9x is negative 4x. And then there's nothing to combine the 15 with, so the answer would be 15. So that would be our answer. What would I do if there was an x squared here like I originally planned? Well, let's go ahead and let's bring it up here. So if it was x plus 3 times x squared minus 3x plus 5. And I'm just going to do a little bit quicker because we should be a little bit more familiar with this at this point. So x times x squared is x to the third power. X times negative 3x is negative 3x squared. X times 5 plus 5x plus 3x squared minus 9x plus 15. Okay, and now we'll just go ahead and add them all together. So it's x to the third power, x squared. Yep, so x to the third power, there's nothing to combine that with. And then we're going to combine the x squareds. Negative 3 plus 3, that's 0, so they cancel each other out, which is interesting. So these cancel each other out. Negative 3 plus 3 is equal to 0, so they get canceled out. And then we're going to do plus 5 and negative 9x, because those are like terms, which would be negative 4x plus 15. So that would be our answer. All right, you guys, we did a lot. So look at that. We learned a lot. How do you feel? Let me know in the comments. Also, follow along because we are going to continue day by day. Every single one of these questions I'm going to go through, and you basically are getting a free tutoring lesson of each one of these problems. We're going to go through with sample problems, and we're going to go through them one by one. If in this video you feel like I was probably taking a little bit too long and you felt like you had the needed skills, then go find my other playlists, because I've answered these questions in other videos, but more quickly with a lot of other questions in those videos. So you can do it at a quicker speed if you need it. I love you guys. I hope you guys have a happy day, and I'll see you in the next one.